Hello, this is Katie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So thank you very much for joining me today, and we're going to be looking at making what I'm calling my quick glamorous bracelets, because I think it looks really impressive, really quite glamorous, but trust me, it is super quick to make and really easy to make too. So what we're going to be using are 6mm beads. Now if you want to use larger, that's fine, just maybe add a little, maybe another 20 centimeters or so to your wrapping wire. But yeah, I'm going to use the 6mm beads today, and the one that I'm going to make is going to be in a black faceted bead, so it'll be even more kind of evening glamour look to it. So the base of this is going to be a 0.9mm. If you haven't got a 0.9, you could use a 0.8mm. So we'll explain that as I go through. And also I've made a clasp for that, which I'll go through right at the very end. So the wires that we're going to be using are a 0.9, a 0.6 and a 1mm for the clasp. Okay, I will add all those details below and the lengths of everything that you need to, and I'll pop it on the video as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with 25 6mm beads. So that is here, 25 6mm beads, and they are on, so this wire here that I've popped these on is a 0.9mm wire, and you need about 30 centimeters of this. That will be plenty for a bracelet. So this is the same amount that made this size, and this fits my wrist, which is about 6 to 6.5 inch wrist, perfectly fine. So just adjust it accordingly to your own wrist size. So on here, like I say, I've got 25 of my 6mm beads, and just a little run through of the pliers that we're going to be using. We're going to be using a pair, so 2 of these. This is more just to open and close jump rings and just to finish off any ends of our chain nose pliers. We've got some flush cutters or side cutters if that's what you have, and I'm also going to be using round nose pliers and or the bell making pliers, just so that we get the same size each time. I'll go through that as we move along, so I'm just going to move those out of the way for a second, and we're going to look at the end. So I've just pushed my beads to one end, I've just put a little stop on there, and what I want to do is I want to create my wrapped loop. So I want to create a double wrapped loop on this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this around here. So what I'm doing is I've got around about 5 centimeters from here to this side, to the left hand side. I'm right handed, so this is the left hand side of my pliers to the end. So I've got about 5 centimeters, and I'm going to create an angle. So I've created that angle there, and then I'm going to work on this piece of wire here. So what I want to do is I want to take my pliers, and I'm using the bail making pliers on the smallest size, so you only want to be a short way down if you're using the round nose pliers, and I'm going to take this around so it comes all the way parallel. Then I'm going to reposition my pliers. I'm going to take this tail either under or over, it doesn't matter, and I'm going to bring it all the way around. I've brought it all the way past. Now I'm going to take this out and reposition just so that I can get around and then bring this around again. So I've brought that all the way around twice. So if we just look on my pliers there, you can see I've got 2 full rounds on my pliers, and I want to leave them in these pliers just while I wrap this tail round. Okay, so just wrapping the tail of the wire around the kind of main piece here. So wrapping this around, and what generally we say is about 3 wraps. So 3 wraps around, and then I can take these pliers out, just give them a wiggle, it will be quite tight. There we go. And you can see there we've got that nice double wrap, so you can see we've got 2 rows of wire here, and then we can just snip this off like so, and just give that a little squish with our pliers just to make sure there's no ends free. Okay, and then we're going to just move our beads all the way up to the other end and do the same on the opposite end. So before you do that, what you want to do is create a more of a bracelet shape. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we want our beads to be able to move, so we want that roundness, and then create this end. So we'll go through that again in just a second. So moving on to the other side, so what we need to do is make sure, like I just said, make sure we've got that roundness to it. And what we need to do is make sure we allow for this little space here. Remember where we just wrapped there? So what I tend to do is I pop my pliers in, so it's around about the same size space as those wraps took up. So if we just take a look at that, got a few millimeters here where those 3 wraps are, and that's the same size that you want to mimic at this side, okay? So, and then you're just going to pull that away and create that angle. Remember that angle that we created at first. So we can see we've got that nice little gap in there, and then I can go in with my pliers exactly the same as I've just done previously. Will be a little bit more awkward on this time because you've kind of got the weight of the bracelet pushing down. So just take your time, just create that double wrapped loop. Don't forget to take your pliers out and reposition over that double side, and then you can bring this around and reposition that over. And now you can see I've got that nice little gap there to start popping those wraps in. So I can bring this over and around once, twice, and 3 times, and that should just fill that gap really nicely, like so. And I can wiggle that out. There we go. And then I can just go in with my pliers and just neaten it up any way that you need to, and then I can just snip off this little bit of excess, and then just using my chain nose pliers just nip that end in, just making sure there's nothing there that could scratch anybody. So now we've got our bracelets. So we've got loops where we can attach our jump rings and clasp to, and we've got our bracelet in place. Now we need to add all that amazing detail with the wire. So for that we are going to take some 0.6mm wire. So I've got this here. This is 0.6mm, and this is 1 meter of that wire. So it's quite a length to be using, but don't worry, it's a lot easier than it looks. So I'm going to take one end of the wire, I'm going to leave a little tail. And what I want to do is I'm going to pop that underneath us, but where these little wraps are. So we're going to be kind of wrapping over them wraps. And what I want to do is hold on to the tail and that little loop there, just so that it kind of gives me something to anchor against. And I'm going to wrap around that a couple of times. So I've wrapped around that twice. So now this is attached. What I can do is I can start framing my beads now. So to frame the beads, what we're going to do is we're going to come up over the top of the bead and down in between, and then through, underneath, and up to the top. Okay, so I've just framed the top of that bead, so we're going to frame the top all the way down to the opposite side. So across the top and then across the middle. So just before you put any wire in place, just using your thumb just to make sure you've placed it exactly where you want it. So, and it's quite quick once you kind of get going with this. So across the top, you can see there, it's just going across the top of each bead and then coming down right in between the beads, like so. Okay, and just every few beads, just take a look at it and just make sure it's sitting nice and evenly and that you're happy with the way it's sitting. So I'm just going to work my way all the way to the opposite side, doing that. So like here, you can see they're a little bit more separated. So before I move on, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop in my pliers and just pull that together a little bit, like so, just so that it neatens it up, and it means that any adjustment that I've made, I can kind of pull that in before we go too far, and it leaves me with no wires to be able to adjust that. So just making sure you're actually placing the wire exactly where you want it. You're not just kind of wrapping, you're placing the wire and looking all the time as to exactly where you want that wire to be, like so. And we're just working all the way along until we get to the opposite side. So making sure everything is exactly where you want it to be. Just take your time over it. And working our way to the opposite side, like so. I'm happy with how that's going. Now you can see it makes just that little wrap just makes such an impact, especially when you're just using solid colour beads. I quite like this. I'm just using one colour because I think it makes it more impactful. Okay, now we've got right to the opposite end. All we're going to do is come around and just make one full circle around that end wrap. Then we're going to turn around, we're going to do the exact same thing the opposite way. So we're going to come around the top of this bead. Now the first one always feels a little bit funny, so just take your time and just place that wire. So I'm just pushing that wire a little bit away, and then I'm bringing it down. So I've brought it down. We just take a closer look at that. I brought it down and it's at the left hand side of the other wire that we put through there. And what it kind of makes is like a little eye shape, I think. When you look at that there, it makes like a little eye shape. Okay, so each of these you're just going to place exactly where you want it. So you're coming exactly the same over the top, and then in between the beads, and then back up in between at the back, over the top, like so, placing it exactly where you want it, and around. Each of these are just going to sit exactly where you place them. It's just be careful that you're not kind of just going rappy, 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 and you're actually placing the wire exactly where you want it. So across the top of that bead, in between, and as you can see there, if I bring that right up to the camera, this wire is coming along the left hand side on mine. I'm right-handed, so it's always coming on the left hand side of the wire that's already there. So I'm coming across the top and again moving along each bead. Okay, and I'm holding everything quite firm in my hand, so you can see that is building up really nice and quickly. This is why I call it kind of a quick, glamorous bracelet, because it can be made so quickly once you've got the hang of it. And all the way to the opposite side. Now 1 metre will be enough. You'll see I'll just end up with a short tail left. But obviously if you've chosen to pop more beads in, more than 25, you may need to add a little bit more. So we've come right the way along, like so. We've come to that very last bead, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to come over that last bead, and I'm going to pop some wraps on there. Now before I do that, I'm going to cut off this little tail. Remember the very start? We started with a little tail, so I'm going to cut that off nice and short. I'm going to give that a little squish, and then I'm just going to take this wire, so it's come over the top of this last bead, and wrap that around a few times and snip off like so. And then all I need to do is give that a little squish all together. Because we've used the 0.6 wire, we've still got a lot of flexibility in the bracelet. It's got a lot of being able to manipulate it. So now all we need to do is add our clasp. So I've just pre-made a few jump rings. That's just using the 1mm wire, and I've made a little clasp. Now we'll just really quickly show you how to make a clasp with some 1mm wire. So it would just take in, it's probably about 10 centimetres there. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to use my bail making pliers. If you haven't got bail making pliers, just use the largest part of your round nose pliers. So I'm going to go in with it's around about the 6mm mark. I'm just going to move those out of the way for a second. So I'm just kind of going in, it's probably far too much wire is that, but I'm just kind of going to make that bend around that 6mm. So I've just made that bend around the 6mm mark. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little bit of this off because I've taken it a bit too far down. Don't worry. And then what I can do is I can start winding this back to make a little clasp. So just winding, just using the very tip of your round nose pliers. I'm going to take a little bit more of that off because it's still a little bit too long. It's always good to cut the tip off when you're starting a round anyway, because it makes it more round. So I've pulled that all the way back, so I've made that little hook shape. I'm just going to squish that in, just using my fingers a bit, just to make it a little bit more set into place. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to pop my pliers in. So you can see I've got about 3mm between the end of the loop from the hook and the edge of my pliers. So, and then I'm just going to push that so that I've got that angle again. So it's just, again, the very similar thing, the wrapped loop. So we're just going to pop in our pliers. So I just want this to be quite small. So I've popped in my pliers on this side, and then I'm just going to push this all the way around. This time it's just going to be a single loop. So I've pushed it all the way around until I get to the other side. Because I'm doing a single loop, I'd prefer to take my pliers out and then hold the loop with another set of pliers, some chain nose pliers, and then just take 2 or 3 wraps around, just so that we've got a nice finish on our clasp. Take the tail of that off. You can see 10 centimeters was a lot of wire for that, but it's always nicer to work with a slightly longer piece. So I've got my little hook clasp there, and it's got my loop where I can attach. So all I need to do now is pop everything together. So now I'm going to be using my 2 pairs of chain nose pliers. I've got a little chain that I made and some jump rings that I made from the 1mm wire. So I'm just going to pop a little bit of a chain on one side. This makes your bracelet nice and adjustable. So I've popped the chain on, I've come through that loop at the end, that double loop that we made, and then I can just wiggle these together to close that up. So I've got a little chain on one side, and I've got my little hook for one side and a jump ring to attach it all together. So again, I can pop my jump ring through, I can pop my little bit of a clasp through, my little hook, and then wiggle those together, and now I'm able to fasten my bracelet like so. There we go. And because I've got that chain, it makes it a little bit more adjustable. So there we are, all finished. I hope you've enjoyed that demonstration. You can use that technique on making earrings as well. So you can work up and down an earring with maybe 5 or 6 beads in it. That would look really pretty, but it's a great way to make quick jewellery to match your outfit anytime. It will take you probably about 10 minutes maximum to make the whole thing. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you again very soon.